Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Frag Out Flavor. You guys want to show how patriotic you are? This stuff is so good, you'll go through puberty twice. Anyways, Frag Out Flavor. Head on over to fragOutFlavor.com. And if you don't know what to get that one special someone for Christmas, head on over to Tactical Penguin. If you are in Utah by Riverdale, head on over to Tactical Penguin. Get something engraved, a rifle, a mug, a piece of wood. It doesn't matter. They'll even engrave your shoe. So just head on over to tacticalpenguin.com. All right, are you guys ready? Let's light this candle. What's up, guys? So today, I know we just got done with the serial killer series for this season, so we're gonna change paces just a little bit, and we're gonna talk about myths and legends of El Salvador. So, for those of you that love the paranormal and love just the different culture, or if you are from El Salvador or your family is, and you're like, oh man, I cannot wait to relive, then you've come to the right show. So today we're going to talk about myths and legends from El Salvador. So let's start off with, I've heard people mention this or pronounce it differently. Like they say La Llorona. Well, it's actually La Llorona. And I haven't heard too much about this. I guess small parts in El Salvador will talk about this, but it's more common in Guatemala and in places like Mexico or Texas or places like that. So I'm going to talk about it anyways because I have heard some Salvadorian people talk about this. So La Llorona. This sad, ghostly woman can be heard crying along the riverbanks at night, looking for any children that may be unfortunate enough to cross her path. In an attempt to get back at the man she loved, who chose another woman, La Llorona decided to drown her children in an act of revenge. Once she realized the horror that she had committed, she drowned herself as well. However, she was not allowed to pass into the afterlife and was sent back to Earth to find her children and gain their forgiveness. Trapped between the living world and the spirit world, she now wanders around crying and searching for her children, and isn't afraid to take any random children in the hopes of passing them off as her own. Never, ever follow the sound of her cries at night. She may try to drown you next. So the sound that they say that she makes is mis hijos, which means my children, my children. So anyway, so here's another one. El tabudo. El tabudo. A popular tale among fishermen, El tabudo is also known as the man with big knees. According to legend, some of these I'm beginning to realize I'm kind of dumb. According to legend, he was once a wealthy fisherman who was one day taken by the sea and eventually reappeared as something more fish than man, his signature being his large, knobby knees. He now awaits all visitors to lakes and lagoons, appearing to people as a humble fisherman in order to win over their trust and confidence so that he can lure them out to the middle of the lake. Once he gets his victims where he wants them, he reveals his true appearance and turns men into large, colorful fish and transforms the women into sirens of the sea. El Salvador is full of delicious fish, so beware of the man with big knees. The next time you go out to catch your next meal, you may encounter the man who was part fish, so he has knees like a fish. Anyways, so yeah, that's one. All right, this was one of my favorite ones. I talked about this in the podcast that I was interviewed for, so, and I covered it briefly. You know, I didn't go into detail. So let's go into detail now. El Cadejo. This story comes in the form of two huge dogs, one with black fur and one with white, one representing good while the other represents evil. The Black Cadejo is an evil spirit who appears to those who wander alone late at night, using his red-hot coal-like eyes to hypnotize his victims in an attempt to steal their souls. The White Cadejo is there to provide protection for his faithful believers, especially children. Some report to have seen a brawl break out between the two in a fight for their soul, while others claim that the White Cadejo had appeared to help a drunk wanderer, and this is what I've heard a lot. It's like, oh, he was followed by a White Cadejo because he was drunk and he had to get home. Some versions of the legend state that after realizing how many difficulties and obstacles arise for mortal humans in everyday life, some good fortune gods decided to create the White Cadejo in an attempt to offer some sort of comfort and protection to those of goodwill and good faith on earth. After seeing this, the devil got jealous and decided to make a black dog of his own to wreak havoc, counteracting the powers of the white dog. Regardless of the origins, El Cadejo, it's safe to say that the story inspires children to avoid wandering about at night. What's interesting is that you do hear people say stuff like that, like, "Hey, don't go out at night. El Cadejo's gonna get you," or So yeah, so it's pretty big in that culture. The folklore and supernatural stuff. So let's continue. La siguanaba. This is probably the most famous one from El Salvador. La siguanaba. La siguanaba, sigua, or segua refers to a horrible woman or ugly woman or cursed woman in the Nahuatl language. So, previously known as siwewet, and is a ghost to beware of late at night. She appears in the night as a beautiful woman in sheer, often white dress, with long, beautiful hair. She summons men wandering in it. Why am I acting now like I'm one of those phone operating guys? Anyways, she summons men wandering in the dark, often targeting those who are drunk. I guess that the point of all these things is don't go wandering around at night when you're drunk. Do that when you're sober. Come on. What are you doing? Anyways, she summons men wandering in the dark, often targeting those who are drunk, conceited, and looking for a conquest. As well as, and for those of you that don't understand what a conquest is, these are men who are wandering around looking for some action. Check out this action, Jackson. And that's what these guys are looking for. They're drunk, they're wandering around the rivers. Like, is there any women out here, who want to hop on this train? Choo choo. Yeah, those kind of guys. So, anyways. As well as men who are unfaithful to their women. She then seduces the men who are looking to seduce her. But once they get close enough to the touch, the men thinking they have just about scored, she reveals her true self, transforming into a thing of horror. Some version says that she was so terrifyingly ugly that she was Hillary Clinton. I'm just kidding. That she was so terrifying ugly that she was nearly deformed, while others say that her face was a bear skull, and some variations even say that she has the head of a horse. Regardless, she is such a terrible sight to see that the man who has the misfortune of laying his eyes on her will either die of fright or go completely insane. La siguanaba came to be this way when Asiwawet, which is Nahuatl, means beautiful woman. She was married to the son of Tlaloc, the god of the rains, and had affairs while he was away at war, and became pregnant with the son of her lover. As a result of these affairs, as punishment for her seduction and infidelity, Tlaloc sought out the help of the Almighty God named Teleotle, and together they cursed and condemned not only Siwawet but her son as well. Now Siguanaba is stuck in a state of horror and deceit, and terrorizes those who are guilty of the same crime she once committed, and is stuck to forever look for her son. All right, this is another one. I remember as a kid, by the way, what's coming up next is El Sipitio. So as a kid, my grandmother would say, all right, dump out those ashes and, make sure you put water on them or just dump them out far away, because if you don't, El Sipitio is going to show up and he's going to start eating them, and he can scare you if you come out. So, yeah, let's continue. Sipit, a name originated from the Nahuatl word used to refer to children, is not only one of the most popular tales in South and Central American culture, but also happens to be the illegitimate son of the infamous siguanaba. While his mother was condemned to forever wander, this young boy was sentenced to eternal youth. He is not a threatening spirit, but instead known for being a jokester. He is dressed rather ridiculously and has a big hat and a big belly. Interestingly, many versions say that his large, bare feet face backwards, so no one can find him when they try to follow his footprints. While he is harmless, he is obnoxious, known to throw pebbles at pretty young girls as they wash their clothing in the river, along with appearing in the night to laugh, dance, whistle, joke. Can you imagine how annoying that's got to be? You're over there, trying to sleep at night, and you left the ashes from the grill there, and all of a sudden you hear, dancing and then laughing and then and joking around like, hey, what's the big deal? So stuff like that, that'll get really annoying fast. Anyways, ultimately, just make a great deal of noise. Most legends say that he is often seen eating a banana, and in some stories says he has the ability to disappear from one place and reappear in another. El sipitio is known to eat. Here we go. El sipitio is known to eat ashes left over in rural kitchens, and is often used as an excuse when people wake to find a mess in the kitchen in the mornings. This character is perhaps one of the most popular among folklore, and he seems entertaining enough to deserve that title. So, you know what? Let's do one more. Because there are just so many, and that's the thing, is that if I went through all the legends, this would be a whole hour show. But so we can't go through all of them, but I'll just do one more. And this one is called The Squeaky Wagon is another one. I remember hearing this, or known as the Witch's Wagon. So as a kid, I remember that people would always say, like, oh, guess what I heard last night? What's that? I heard the squeaky wagon, or I heard the witch's wagon, depending on what region of El Salvador you're in. If you're more in the jungle-ish area, it's the witch's wagon. If you're in the more, like the city, going with the squeaky wagon. So let's continue. The screaming cart walks backwards, strolling at night in the streets of some towns in El Salvador. Its name originates precisely from the squeaky sound that its wooden wheels make when it walks. They also say that sometimes chains or bones are heard dragging when it passes, and that one listens first before seeing it arrive. Some say that when the earth passes by it, it shakes. And others comment that whoever dares to look at it wakes up dead the next day. That makes no sense. How do you wake up dead? This cart, which carries human skulls on its poles, does not have oxen, and there is no one to guide it. It simply walks alone, as if some ghost were propelling it forward. However, some think that it is a spirit that's in charge of collecting the souls that are in pain and guiding them towards the afterlife. Another version says that the cart is driven by a headless corpse. Whatever it is, don't risk looking at it, since the consequences could be serious for whoever tries it. So, what's crazy is that people take this kind of stuff super serious. Like, I remember as a kid in school, a teacher was telling us, and he said, hey, I heard the squeaky cart last night. So I went inside and, basically I wasn't out. I didn't want to be outside to see it. And jokingly, I said something like, I would hop on. And then he immediately got super angry with me. And he started yelling at me, like, don't you ever, if you ever hear the squeaky wheels, don't you go outside. You're going to go insane or you're going to die. So, let's look at the origin of this, because to me, this is probably one of the most interesting ones. So the story goes that many years after the Spanish arrived in El Salvador, a man named Terencio Perez he came, who was educated by priest Fray Antolin Oviedo, who taught him some things from, taught him a bunch of things. When the priest died, Terencio moved to another town where there was an acquaintance of the priest. This other character was an apothecary who had a kind of pharmacy and taught him how to cure diseases. On a certain occasion, Terencio met an indigenous man named Juan Tepa, and with whom he became best friends, with the purpose that the Indian would give him many secrets about plants that cured diseases, and then apply them to earn money and enrich himself with that knowledge. Since then, he changed his name and decided to call himself Terencio Perez de la Trocadera, so his name would seem even better and classier. So a lot of people listening, they're like, this means nothing to me. So the Spaniard took advantage of his knowledge and became rich, curing the Spaniards of diseases without them knowing that he had learned all this from the Indian people of El Salvador, the indigenous people. To such an extent that at one point a plague affected the Indians, and Terencio Perez de la Trocadera, he didn't want to help them because they could not pay him, because he didn't want the Spanish to find out that he was a friend of the people, of the indigenous people. One night, the ghost of Fray Antolin appeared to tell him that he no longer had a part in this world, since many people had died because of him, and because what he had learned, that he didn't use it for good, basically used it to enrich himself. So he ordered Terencio to build a cart of bones from the bones of those who had died because of him. He told him that he would be a wandering soul, and would forever search for a cemetery to bury those he didn't want to help. So that's a version of the story. So he was cursed for taking advantage of the witches from that town, and then he used it to enrich himself. And then when a plague came, he refused to help them because he's like, "Ugh, I'm gonna help these indigenous people. They can't even read." So So that's the story. So that's it. It's it's just one of those things where to a lot of people this is ridiculous, but when you grow up in that culture, like, all this stuff makes perfect sense and it's scary. So anyways, that's it for today's episode. Remember, guys, that you guys can like and subscribe on YouTube, and if you guys want the audio only version, you guys can head on over to Spreaker.com/Decon versus the Dark, or head on over to Spotify. And on Spotify, you can find me there. You can find me on iHeartRadio. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find this. Or you can head on over to the Googles or to the DuckDuckGos if you don't want to be traced. And then just type in Decon, DKON versus the Dark, and my podcast should appear. So that's it, guys. So remember, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.